Hello and welcome to the United Stand. I'm Mark Goldbridge and this video is about Mauricio Pochettino and why he would be a fantastic choice as Manchester United manager. We're going to look at how he plays, how that fits into Manchester United, what his best 11 is going to be, because it actually isn't that, that's just an idea. We'll look at tactics again and how that will be implemented back into the Premier League and how Manchester United will improve and what players would improve massively under Pochettino. Now I just want to put a disclaimer out there. There's no guarantee that Pochettino is going to be our next manager. We're managed by the Glazers, Ed Woodward. Anything is possible. God knows what goodies they've got for us in their hat that they're going to pull out. But Pochettino, there is no perfect choice. But Pochettino ticks a lot of the boxes. Premier League proven, very good brand of football, good at developing players, good at recruiting players, and certainly I think when you look at the current squad, many people are going to benefit. So let's get into it with Pochettino. I mean, look, I think he wants the United job. I don't believe PSG have got the power to stop this, first of all. If Pochettino wants this job and United want Pochettino, he's Man United's manager. The problem is, do Man United want Pochettino and do they want to spend the money, or do they want to go down the cheap option of getting an interim in to play to play this stupid Friends reunited crap that we do with the coaches that we've got that should have been sacked? The reality is this is not like a player that's unsettled. You can put them in the reserves, you can tell them to see out the season. If your manager says I'm not happy and I want to go to Man United and you say you're not, and it's in November, you've got a big problem. They've got to listen. So we'll see what happens with that. But Pochettino, let's just start off with the journey of Pochettino, really, and how he plays football. So at Southampton, funny enough, I tweeted earlier what Luke Shaw had said about him a few years ago. So Luke Shaw basically said, at Southampton, we were one of the best teams in the league with Pochettino. The football we were playing was fantastic. I really hope to play with him again. I've had many ups and downs in my careers, but with Pochettino, it was just up, up, up. It was great to play for him. Luke Shaw, Pochettino had a massive impact on Luke Shaw's career. So much so that I think he used to pick him up and, helped him out with his diet and everything. So they've got a great relationship. I think Luke Shaw even described it as a bit like a father-son sort of thing. So it just shows you the measure of the man Pochettino, that what he's like as a manager is that he's very, very good as a coach, but also very good relationships with his players. Obviously at Southampton they did really well. He went to Spurs, and we'll talk about how he would set Manchester United up. But I think one of the first things to start off with, because everyone will be all about, this is how we're going to play, we're going to win the Champions League, we're going to win the World Cup, we're going to win the Grand National. No. There's no guarantee that anyone's going to win Manchester United a Premier League, because we're owned by the Glazers and Ed Woodward's the CEO, and they just don't run the team like a football club. There are no guarantees, but there would be massive improvements under a coach like Pochettino. But first of all, let's hit what not many people would talk about first. Let's look at where it's gone wrong in his career. Now at PSG, it's very easy to say it's gone wrong. He didn't win the title, but he didn't have a full season. People will say, well, Tuchel didn't have a full season and he won the Champions League. I think at PSG it's very different. If you want to use Tuchel, what he did at Chelsea, let's do what Tuchel did at PSG. Laurent Blanc won a title at PSG and got the sack. They're focused on the Champions League. It's not a good place to be a manager at PSG, and I don't think you can judge a manager based on PSG. But, Pochettino's football at PSG isn't dissimilar to the way that they played at Spurs. I think he finds it harder because he's got Mbappe, Neymar and Messi who aren't going to work as hard as the players did at Spurs for him, because you've got big ego players with a big club. But Ancelotti didn't do particularly well at PSG. So Pochettino at PSG, I don't judge him on that. I judge him on Spurs. And Spurs was in the Premier League, and obviously Spurs was where really Pochettino became such a big pull for Manchester United. It went wrong for him at Spurs because basically the team got tired mentally and tired physically. Pochettino's football is very demanding, which we'll talk about in a moment. But at Spurs, if you look at Spurs now, if Harry Kane or Son gets injured, they're in big trouble. They haven't really got depth, and they've never really had depth. So when you've got a manager like Pochettino, the way he demands his players work, and look, the Premier League's very demanding, and then you've got European football, Carabao Cup, FA Cup. You're using the same set of players every 3 days, playing a brand of football that's very demanding. And Spurs burnt out in the end. They burnt out. They didn't win the Champions League. They didn't massively invest in that summer. They came back for another season and they'd hit the peak. The Champions League final was Spurs' peak, and then the players didn't win it, and it was like, well, we've got to go again. And I think it was fatigue for the players, and it didn't work out, and he ended up leaving. But Spurs haven't really gone anywhere since Poch left, have they? So they lost a good manager, but it was time to part ways. It wasn't a bad ending, and to say, well, he didn't win anything at Spurs, who does win anything at Spurs? So look, I think Pochettino, let's look at the way that he plays. If Pochettino came to Manchester United, there are big positives. He's got Varane, he's got Ronaldo, he's got some very good players. Obviously, he's got that relationship with Luke Shaw. He wanted Bruno Fernandes at Spurs, and he spoke glowingly about Donny van der Beek when they played them in the Champions League semi-final for Spurs. So Ajax played Spurs. So there's players at the club that you know straight away that Pochettino has an affection for in relation to their playing style. I don't think that this would be rocket science in relation to how we play. I think he would play a 4-2-3-1, and that those two wide players would play narrow. That's what he does, and we'll talk about the positives of that in a moment. But we'll see a totally different Manchester United. When you look at Pochettino, he is the sort. Look, the press that you know. I think when he was at Spurs, there was one season where Spurs were pressing more than any team in the league, even more than Pep's Man City. So you get that with Pochettino. You get this obsessive press, but it's also a risk-averse press. It's not like press and leave yourself open at the back. You know, they do press through the middle. They try and push teams to the flank because then you've got the protection of the touchline, you know, so you force them into the flank. And what this risk-averse press from Pochettino is all about, it's about pressing in the right way, and it's about, you know, being risk-averse. You're trying to force the opposition to hit a long ball and then pick up possession from that long ball. It's not about throwing everybody forward and then you might be at risk from the long ball. So it's all about positional movement without the ball to get that ball. But it's not like get the ball back in 5 seconds like Pep. It's a very oppressive press, but it's risk-averse as well. And it's all about the movement, and that's what you will get. And if you contrast with that with the way Manchester United play at the moment, that's going to be a massive improvement because we are awful at pressing. If you think about that Leicester game where we tried to press and they just passed through us and then got it at our back four, this would be going back to coaching. You know, you couldn't bring Pochettino in and then have Carrick and McKenna as the coaches. He needs his team to do it because one man can't do it. And you need total control. And I spoke about this morning. If you bring an interim in and they walk in on Monday morning, you know, and Carrick and McKenna are there and the players are there, the manager's got to please the players because the players already know the coaches, which are Carrick and McKenna, and they've got a relationship. Pochettino walks in next Monday with his team and Carrick and McKenna aren't there. Those players have got to bloody impress the new manager and the coaches, and that's what United need, a new coaching setup that the players adapt and work for. And that's what would happen with Pochettino. You would see a massive improvement within 2 or 3 weeks in relation to how we play football. And some players will become instantly better. And I think, you know, one player I want to talk about in a minute is Marcus Rashford, who I think would improve. Look, it'd be sink or swim for Rashford, but I think he would swim and I think he'd become a better player like many others. Defensively, without the ball, with the ball, how does Pochettino play? Well, look, I think that Pochettino is very adaptive in the way that he plays. I think if a team presses him with one player, he'll just leave two back. If a team presses with three, he'll pull his fullbacks back, and that's, you know, again, it's risk averse, but it's not risk averse. It's not defensive because it's like it depends how the opposition attack him and how he will do it. The reason he plays with a narrow front three, which we'll talk about in a minute, is so that the fullbacks can push on and provide width. So it is an attacking team, but it's also about, you know, always having options. If the number 6 or the number 8 in the two midfield positions are occupied, then it's about movement. It's about the fullback moving into space and pulling people out. It's about not being afraid to switch the play with a diagonal ball for 30 yards. It's about not being scared to hit a long ball into Rashford if you want to. But ideally, it's about playing through the triangles, it's about diamonds, it's about positional, it's about movement, and it's about adaptability across that back six, which we just don't see. We're so rigid under Solskjaer in this Carrick setup because that's, you know, we've seen McTominay and Fred hide. You can't do that in a Pochettino side. The number 6 and the number 8, whoever it is, they've got to want the ball. And even if you want the ball, sometimes it's not easy. Somebody will come for you. But if you want the ball, you get the ball, and then somebody else wants the ball. If you want the ball and people go to you, then your fullback or your other 8's got to find some space. And it's about movement in a Pochettino system. It's a very, very intense system, and it would take not very long, I think, for these players to adapt to it. But it would be night and day to what we've seen over the last 5 years. If you take even the way that Mourinho played, even the way Van Gaal played at the end, this would be like, Man United fans would love it. And I'm not saying it's going to be as good as Pep or, you know, even as good as Klopp, but Pochettino's style of football would be so different to what we've seen, and the energy levels in that in the players is going to be good. Now, before we talk about how we line up and you know why we play so narrow, I think I dropped that negative about Spurs and burnout purposely because It was burnout at Spurs that cost him his job. He became fatigued. The players became fatigued. They didn't, but it's because they didn't have a big squad. If you look at Manchester United and you look at that team on the left, now if that is the front four, and after about half a season they go, performances start to drop because they're tired. Well, Cavani had worked brilliant in this system. I want to talk about that. If it's not Rashford, it could be Greenwood or Martial. If it's not Sancho, it could be Greenwood or Martial. If it's not Bruno, it could be Pogba. It could be Lingard. There are options even with the squad that we've got before Pochettino starts to build his own team out. Because what we're talking about Pochettino is with that team how he would line up. Now let's talk about that. I think the back four would be the back four. I mean, look, Maguire, I think he would use Maguire because I think he would. Varane definitely, Luke Shaw definitely, David De Gea definitely. Wan-Bissaka, look, he'd be an interesting one for the future as to whether he would keep him. And I wouldn't be surprised if United still looked at Trippier because obviously Pochettino had him. But what Pochettino wants in his fullbacks and what you get out of a good Luke Shaw is somebody whose stamina levels are unbelievable, who is quick, who can defend but can also get forward. Now that would be the challenge for Wan-Bissaka because that's a very important position. And it was a problem that happened with Spurs when they lost Kyle Walker to Manchester City, that Pochettino never really got the player that he wanted in that position. So that would be one to watch. Moving into the midfield, I think as things stand, it would be Fred and Donny. He really likes Donny, and what he doesn't want is two static midfielders. Fred and Donny would give him that energy. They wouldn't. I think you want to bring players in, definitely. You'd probably want two very different players to that. But out of what we've got, I just don't think Matic would have the mobility. And Scott McTominay just doesn't have the toolkits. Now, that doesn't mean that neither of them won't play. Maybe they would become better players under Pochettino. But on the face of it, I think it would be Fred and Donny because it's that energy. You've got to be very energetic in a Pochettino side, and those two players are. So I think he would go with that. Bruno would obviously play. Loved Bruno Fernandes. He wanted him at Spurs, and I think he would get the best out of Bruno, and I think we'd see a better Bruno. Sancho would obviously play. Now, these are the two positions that are really interesting. They're narrow wide forwards. They're not wide forwards. That doesn't mean they won't go wide for a diagonal or a long ball. Like they will do that. But they are narrow forwards to help with the central press that has to occur. If you go too wide, people play through the middle. Pochettino doesn't want teams to play through the middle. So that's why Sancho and Rashford in this system would play more narrow to stop teams playing through the middle or make it harder for them to play through the middle, because he wants that press to push through the middle and push them to the wide and force the long ball. Or even if you've got them on the wide, it's difficult to play. It's easier to play through teams when you play through the middle because you've got such a big space. If you halve that pitch and push them to the side, that's why Pochettino's team plays narrow, so their front four are close together and they can push together. So Sancho would be well used to that from his Dortmund days. Rashford would be the evolution player. It might not be him, but I think Rashford would... I don't think Rashford's developed over 3 years under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I don't think the coaches are equipped enough to develop players. I don't think they are. I think under Pochettino you would see a development of so many players, and I think it would be sink or swim for Rashford, but I think he would swim. I think he needs to be a player that learns to get his head up. I think he's a player that needs to learn how to press from the front. I think he's a player who needs to learn how to be more of a team player, and I think Rashford would get that opportunity that he won't get under this current coaching system. And then that leaves Ronaldo, who's very interesting because Ronaldo as a pressing player from the front is not really that man. But I think people think, well, it's not going to work. Obviously, Cavani pressing from the front would be great, but Cavani's not going to play 50% of our games anymore. He's just not fit enough. So Ronaldo would be key to this team. He's got the goals in him, and I think Pochettino would love that. And I think Ronaldo does press, but he's no good pressing on his own. And with this narrow front four, I think Pochettino would get the best out of Ronaldo in that situation. So I wouldn't have too much concerns about it. Players I think he'd bring in, definitely he'd be looking at those two CDM roles. And I think he'd love to bring a player like De Jong in from Barcelona. He'd be perfect. I think that on the right hand side he'd be looking at a right back that's mobile, that can provide the attacking and defensive support that team needs, because what will happen is when United are on the attack, if Sancho and Rashford are playing more narrow, you've got to provide the width, because your problem is that you're very narrow, that you're playing very central there, so your fullbacks have got to provide the width so that your front four is central but your fullbacks are providing the width, and then you get the defensive support from whichever CDM is playing on that side. So I think with Pochettino it would be a totally different United, and a very very different United very quickly. Obviously I haven't mentioned Paul Pogba because I'm working on the assumption that this would happen you know, hopefully by the Arsenal game. And Pochettino and obviously Pogba's not going to be back until January. Where Paul Pogba fits into this system, to be honest with you, it doesn't really matter. And that's not me saying sell Paul Pogba. That's me saying Pogba's not fit. And also Pogba doesn't really fit into that team at the moment anyway. You would have to... And where, you know, does Pogba fit in a Pochettino side? Does Pogba fit in a Pep side? You know, has Pogba got that intensity to run, which you need to have in a Pochettino side, but you need to have it in a Pep side, you need to have it in a Klopp side. So the question marks about Pogba were always going to happen if we bring a top level coach in with a coaching team that befits that coach. So Pogba is probably, in this world, the fact that he's injured is bad, but in this world it wouldn't be a massive problem, because I think, you know, Pogba is probably a bit of a headache for a Pochettino straight away, or any manager that comes in that wants to build something, because Pogba's probably gone in the summer anyway, so him being injured in these first few weeks of a new manager's career probably isn't a massive issue, because they don't have to put up with why is Pogba on the bench, etc. And then it gives this team time to grow. But look, I might be completely wrong. You know, he might think McTominay can be turned into something. He might think that no, you know, Martial's the player I want. And that's the great thing about a new manager coming in anyway, the clean slate that every player gets. But look, when you look at Pochettino, the things that always come to mind with him is that when Spurs didn't have the ball, their pressing levels were unbelievable, apart from that last season. When they did have the ball, they were very hard to pinhole, because they had players that were quick and powerful up front that they could hit a long ball to if they needed to, but they also had the ability to play through. And you know, I think about Spurs when they had people like Dembele there, and they were very, very good in the midfield, and very powerful and very physical, and very, you know, always a problem team to play against Spurs. Of course, the big question is Pochettino's never won anything, but to me, yeah, United need to win things, but Manchester United haven't won things under 4 managers, really. All right, Mourinho won a Europa League and a Carabao Cup, and Van Gaal won an FA Cup. But when we say win things, Manchester United fans mean titles, you know, hopefully a Champions League. And look, I'm not saying Pochettino's the perfect guy for Manchester United. What I'm saying is that I think in the next day or so, we're going to find out whether he's going to be the man for Manchester United. And if he is, I think this video shows why he would be a very good choice. And Manchester United certainly should be doing everything they can to get Pochettino if they're thinking of getting an interim and sticking with Carrick and McKenna, because Carrick and McKenna as coaches and an interim ain't going to touch what you'd see if we had Pochettino in charge, because it'd be very different, and it would be that reset, and it would be exciting. And you know, I think what United fans deserve more than anything is that reset, and I think the players deserve it as well. We just need a new coach and a new coaching setup, and imagine what that coaching setup would be with Pochettino, and how to you know, as early as next Monday he could be in the club with his coaches, and it would be you know, the excitement would be huge. No one's guaranteeing it would work, but it would be something that we knew was coming, that we like the look of, and let's see whether these players can respond. That's where we need to get to, in my opinion. Anyway, thanks everyone for watching. Smash a like on the video. Make sure you subscribe. I'm back live again at 7 o'clock ahead of PSG Man City, which I'm doing a watch along for on That's Football. If you want to get your jumpers, by the way, links in the chat. Christmas is coming. We do ship worldwide. Links in the chat, and I'll speak to you all soon. Make sure you smash a like on the video if you enjoyed it and you don't mind the idea of Poch as manager. Thanks for watching.